The biggest lies told in Dragon Ball media. Let's get into it. Subscribe if you enjoy. To begin, we have Frieza's statement that he made on Namek during his final battle against Super Saiyan Goku. Goku attempts to finish off Frieza with a Kamehameha, but Frieza charges up a Ki Blast and fires it right at Namek's core in order to blow up the planet and kill Goku. But this attack fails. All it does is speed up the process of Namek's destruction, which angers Frieza, but it still works in his favor. Frieza would then go on to state that in 5 minutes, planet Namek would blow up and Goku would die. This is because Saiyans can't breathe in space, whereas Frieza's race can. This was stated to not only give the reader a time frame on what would happen if Goku didn't beat Frieza in time, but I assume it was also meant to build up hype and suspense. Can Super Saiyan Goku beat Frieza within 5 minutes and escape Namek before it's too late? The manga pacing sort of stays true to the 5-minute statement from Frieza, as after Frieza says this, the fight only lasts for 7 more chapters. However, the real issue began to arise when you switch over and watch Dragon Ball Z's anime, as the fight between Goku and Frieza would go on for 9 more episodes, which would feel far longer than 5 minutes to the viewer, and this is where the famous time in anime kind of comes from. Many people on the internet tried to come up with theories or explanations as to why Goku vs Frieza was 5 minutes. Theories like Frieza's race counting time is differently, Frieza purposely detonating Namek's core for 5-minute time limit and then on, but really it's a mix of 2 answers. In universe, from series like Dragon Ball to Z and onward, almost every single battle isn't shown to scale properly within time. For a modern example, the entire tournament of power during Dragon Ball Super lasted for 48 minutes in universe, and it took 35 episodes for those 48 minutes to pass, which would be 13 hours of time if we include the opening and end credits. This isn't even specific to Dragon Ball Z, but for anime in general. Most episodes are about 18-ish minutes of animation, during which these characters are fighting at speeds which are absolutely incomprehensible to the average person viewing them. But for the sake of the actual audience viewing the series, there has to be a distortion in time and speed to allow us to see what moves and techniques these characters are using, and to just overall be able to track the fight. This is why people have been making fun of power scaling recently, because they see Naruto being faster than light and he's traveling a forest for like 2 episodes. It's meant for the viewer, obviously, but inverse, it's way different. That's why whenever animators try to get creative and use a more literal interpretation of what high-speed battle looks like, we can barely see the characters and have to slow it down and watch frame by frame. And then imagine having to do that every time for a series you loved. Doesn't sound ideal. It'd be confusing and frankly cause you to lose interest, which is why the fights are slowed down. If the battle time for Dragon Ball was more on the realistic side of things, entire arcs would be finished within a few episodes. The second reason for why Goku vs Frieza felt so long in the anime is because at the actual time that the DBZ anime was airing, which was at that point the Namek saga, they had caught up to the manga, which was being serialized at the time. So like most series do, they use filler episodes in order to give the manga time to basically overtake it. That is why the DBZ anime has been memed so hard for having power-ups that supposedly take 10 episodes, or the Namek saga lasting 9 more episodes despite Frieza saying that Namek will blow up in 5 minutes. Dragon Ball Z Kai is different and adapts the manga to a T, but this is only because by the time Kai aired, the story had been finished, so there was no need for filler content. This isn't to say that Dragon Ball Z's filler isn't canon, and I've already gone over explanations in past videos as to why that isn't the case, but simply put, the 5-minute claim by Frieza was technically true, but to the viewer it seems so far-fetched because the battle was long, and there were several points in the anime to where they caught up with the manga and subsequently needed to use filler to stall and give the manga enough time to catch up. The next lie on the list is the pure-hearted Super Saiyan, which was immediately proven false during the Android and Cell saga. Vegeta would arrive to assist Goku and the Z-Fighters in the battle against the androids after spending 3 years training in order to catch up to Goku. Vegeta would not only reveal that he naturally became stronger, but he too has become a Super Saiyan. This shocks everyone, including Krillin, who states, "I thought you had to have a serene heart to become a Super Saiyan." Serene basically referring to pure heart, calm. Vegeta mocks Krillin's statement and states that his heart is pure, but pure evil, followed by explaining he put himself through the harshest training ever, and once he realized his limitations, he fell into self-loathing, and only then was he able to become a Super Saiyan. However, this would obviously still be confusing to many. How did Vegeta become a Super Saiyan if he was pure evil? At this point in time, although he did help the others with the androids, it was only to test his strength and to get them out of the way so that he could have his rematch with Goku and kill him. Some fans try to say that because Krillin only mentioned this, then it's false, as this was an idea and conclusion that only Krillin came to and nobody else. But again, this is wrong. Way back in the Namek saga, Goku himself states that he's a warrior with a serene heart awakened by rage. And even Frieza agreeing with Goku and specifically stating, in quote, "I suppose that explains how Vegeta was never able to become one." This plot point is actually never revisited again in the story, and if anything, it gets even more complicated as Goten and Trunks are able to access Super Saiyan fairly easily, and even the Universe 6 Saiyans such as Khalifa can do it by tingling their back. Even Bardock, who is a beloved character in the Dragon Ball community, but is far from pure-hearted, is able to become a Super Saiyan in the movies. So what's the actual prerequisite for becoming a Super Saiyan? And does it really matter if you're pure evil? Toriyama would go on to do an interview in January of 2018 where he gave a specific breakdown of the requirements to go Super Saiyan. He states, "Can anyone become a Super Saiyan if they train? It's not like anyone can become a Super Saiyan through training and anger. In order to become a Super Saiyan, one's body must contain something called S cells. Once these S cells reach a certain amount, a trigger such as anger will explosively increase the S cells and cause a change in the body. That's Super Saiyan. Most Saiyans have some S cells, although not a great quantity. The reason why Goku and Vegeta's children can become Super Saiyan relatively easily is because, to a certain extent, they inherited a lot of S cells, and also because Earth's environment is gentler and easier to live in than planet Vegeta. Lately, everyone becomes Super Saiyan so easily, but it is no simple matter." The interviewer then asked Toriyama how a Saiyan can increase their S cells count, and Toriyama then states that having a gentle spirit is the best way to greatly increase one's S cells. But most Saiyans have trouble with this, which is why I think no Super Saiyans appeared for such a long time. They just became the stuff of legend. However, one can't reach the quantity necessary for becoming a Super Saiyan simply by having a gentle spirit, so a certain amount of battle power is indeed necessary. Looked at it in this light, it's easy to see why becoming a Super Saiyan came easy for Goku, ignoring the fact that S cells are obviously inspired by midichlorians, microscopic, sentient life forms that reside inside cells and determine how close a user is to the Force. This does explain how Goku was able to become a Super Saiyan. By the way, Force means from Star Wars. He had a high battle power, higher than any Saiyan in history at the time, with a power level of 3 million. Jace was utterly shocked when Ginyu estimated that Goku's max power was 60,000, as he would state that no Saiyan has ever had a power level that high. And we know that Goku's true power level in Namek prior to getting a Zenkai and facing Frieza was 90,000, meaning Goku got nearly 33 times stronger and then some, which would obviously be a high enough increase to give him the necessary base power to become a Super Saiyan. As for Vegeta, although he was pure evil during the Android and Cell saga, he had a high enough base power to become a Super Saiyan. Goten and Trunks both inherited a lot of S cells from Goku and Vegeta, and Earth's environment made their spirit more gentler, and thus they could become Super Saiyans. The Universe 6 Saiyans are a bit more confusing, but can still somewhat be explained. Universe 6 Saiyans don't have tails like Universe 7 Saiyans, and have never transformed into Super Saiyans. However, they have extraordinary high battle power, as Kaba was equal to base Vegeta post-resurrection of F-Arc. Go check out SSJ4 Gogeta vs Kaba. Which is insane, as this base Vegeta had already acquired Super Saiyan God and Super Saiyan Blue, making him leagues above God Goku from Battle of Gods, and despite that fact, base Kaba is equal to him. Kaba was also a genuinely good person who fought for planet Sadala as an officer, so he should be able to become a Super Saiyan, especially considering the fact that he was taught by Vegeta of all people, who had become a Super Saiyan for decades. Kale also had a gentle heart and high battle power, so becoming a Super Saiyan was a no-brainer for her. Khalifa is the only Saiyan who has a bit more of controversy around her, as Kaba told her to feel for a tingly sensation in her back to become a Super Saiyan, despite all the previous Saiyans needing some sort of emotional trigger. I'm not sure why people get so upset over this, because it doesn't lessen the impact of Super Saiyan. Khalifa was already an abnormally strong Saiyan and a gifted fighter, so her being able to brute force her way to become a Super Saiyan should have been pretty simple, even if it doesn't make sense, especially since early in Dragon Ball Z, this stuff already happened. If you're upset at Khalifa becoming a Super Saiyan so easily, then you should keep that same energy to Goten and Trunks, who needed no sort of emotional trigger, and just became Super Saiyans because they had a high S cell count. But in summary, requiring a pure heart to become a Super Saiyan was simply retconned by Toriyama, who changed his stance on a lot of things concerning Dragon Ball as the series progresses and as he got older. Before delving deeper, it's best to explain Akira Toriyama's editors. Toriyama had 3 editors over the course of Dragon Ball, but he only had 1 editor at any given time. His first editor was Kazuhiko Torishima, who was also the man at Jump who first discovered Toriyama and served as his editor for all of Dr. Slump. Torishima was editor from the beginning of Dragon Ball up until the end of the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai. Toriyama's second editor was Yu Kondo, who took over during the Saiyan arc and lasted up until when Cell reached his perfect form. The third editor was Fuyoto Takeda, who took over when Perfect Cell appeared, and lasted until Dragon Ball's end. He has also served as an editor for Toriyama's post-Dragon Ball work. It was commonly rumored at Jump that Toriyama incorporated his editors into Dragon Ball as villains. Torishima was rumored to be the basis for Piccolo Daimyo, while Kondo was rumored to be the basis for Frieza, and Takeda the basis for Majin Buu. These rumors were prevalent enough to even be mentioned in Shenlong Times issue 2, where the editors discussed them briefly. Kondo, for his part, had always imagined himself as the basis for Trunks. However, when asked about this in Dragon Ball Forever, Toriyama denied consciously basing these characters on his editors, but admitted that they might have done so subconsciously. At any rate, Torishima is undoubtedly the basis for the villainous Dr. Mashiro in Dr. Slump. As you can see in the name, Mashirito Torishima. The problem stems from the fact that Dragon Ball fans tend to treat Toriyama's 3 editors as simply as a group, as if they had each simultaneously served as his editor during Dragon Ball's entire run. There are a couple of reasons for this. This isn't true at all, and Viz is partly to blame, as in the translations, they have Toriyama refer to editors as plural, which would make it seem as if he had more than one editor that he worked with at a time. Firstly, this is simply confusion due to there not being all that much information on them out there. This is because Japanese lacks a real plural, making it sometimes ambiguous as to how many people are intended, but other times it is just Viz being a little strange. For instance, in their translation of Toriyama's closing remarks from Dragon Ball's final chapter, they have Toriyama say that, "My editors have agreed to let me end this manga." Whereas in the original, Toriyama talks about getting Kankeisha, those involved, to let him end the series. Toriyama's editor would be one of those involved, of course. And at that time, Toriyama would only have had one single editor, Kyoto Takeda, not multiple ones. But in actuality, it was only Torishima who complained to Toriyama about Android 19 and 20 being subpar villains, which caused Android 17 and 18 to replace them. Nothing is said about Toriyama's actual editor at the time, Kondo having any objections to number 19 and number 20 being the main villains. This claim has thoroughly permeated in the Dragon Ball fandom online, becoming accepted as simply common knowledge amongst most fans. It's been referenced back in 1996 by Glenn Wang on a Dragon Ball FAQ and former Viz editor Jason Thompson in 2011. However, Toriyama has never publicly stated that he intended to end Dragon Ball after the Frieza saga, and in fact he says the opposite in most interviews when the topic of Dragon Ball's endings is brought up. The simple answer would be just for us to say that, as fans who have read virtually all of Toriyama's published interviews and aim to document this as best we can, he has in fact never said that in any interview we have ever seen. It is of course possible that he did say it in an interview which we have not seen, but nobody ever seems to be able to identify what interview that might be. Toriyama makes a statement that lays this argument to rest during June of 1991, just before Goku became a Super Saiyan for the first time, or in a more simpler term, during the time when the Namek saga was being serialized. Toriyama's notes. Still though, it's strange that even after doing so much Dragon Ball, I don't want to end it yet. Normally, I'm pretty fickle by nature. Toriyama even revisits this question during 2023 in an interview between himself and Kazuhiko Torishima, where he states, "That's the hardest thing about action manga. If you draw it on the same level as the previous fight, it'll seem to the readers that the level has actually gone down. So I gradually came to believe that there's a limit to making the character stronger. In terms of having to take the level of action portrayals even higher, it got quite difficult from around the time the battle with Frieza ended." Torishima then jokingly responds by saying the Frieza saga would have been the best place for him to stop, with Toriyama joking back. So it's very clear that ending Dragon Ball at the Frieza saga was never Toriyama's intention. This was simply a hoax that gained a lot of traction online and became accepted amongst a good portion of Dragon Ball fans. But can the same be said for the Cell saga? The way it ends certainly seems like Dragon Ball is over. Goku has died twice now and doesn't want to be revived, as he believes he attracts bad guys to Earth. Gohan is now the strongest character in the series, and Goku has propped him up to be the protector of Earth. And even Vegeta states that Goku and Gohan have both surpassed him in strength and spirit, and he no longer has the will to be a warrior anymore. This also stems from the claim that Toriyama felt mentally drained after the Cell saga because he wanted to end at certain points, but his editors forced him to introduce numerous characters. Originally, Android 19 and 20 were supposed to be the main villains of the arc, but were replaced by Android 17 and 18, followed by Imperfect Cell. Toriyama was then supposedly forced to give Cell his semi-perfect form and finally his perfect form, which satisfied the editors. Rather, what Kondo objected to was Cell's initial design, and then his second form's design. The editors seem to take undue criticism from fans for being meddling fools who do nothing but mess up Toriyama's perfect vision, when in reality, one of the only confirmed instances of their interference was in preventing the Cell arc from climaxing in a confrontation between the Z Warriors and Dr. Gero. It is rather interesting that Toriyama would feel that there was no helping it, and he had to bring in new villains simply because someone who was no longer his editor voiced his disapproval of the current bad guys. As mentioned, Torishima went on to become a significant figure at Jump and Shueisha, but at the time he was the editor of V-Jump. It is unclear how that would affect his relationship to/with Toriyama. Perhaps his position as head of one of the Shueisha's major magazines simply gave him the right to monkey with Toriyama, even if he was not actually head of the magazine which Dragon Ball happened to be running in. Maybe Toriyama was simply conditioned by this point to listen to whatever Torishima said, even if he did not technically have the authority to boss him around anymore. It could also be that Toriyama had a gut feeling that Torishima was right and Androids 19 and 20 lacked as villains. Getting back to the argument that the Cell Saga was originally planned to be Dragon Ball Z's last arc, this is just blatantly false. Toriyama has never said such thing in interviews. He would not have been simply told at the last minute that he would not be allowed to end the series there, so pointing out how climactic the end of the Cell arc feels is irrelevant, or how most of the dialogue in the final chapters feel like they were really saying goodbye to Dragon Ball. If Toriyama had actually been given the option to end it there, it's likely that he would have. But then again, we'll never know for sure. The only thing that is confirmed within this theory is that Toriyama did plan to have Gohan replace Goku as the main protagonist of Dragon Ball going forward, which ultimately debunks the theory of him planning to end the Cell Saga. However, in the Buu Saga, he decided to bring back Goku and have him be the protagonist again because having Gohan as the main character just didn't work out. It's really as simple as that. He had an idea which he played around with during the drafts, but he just changed his mind. With all that being said, this concludes the video on Dragon Ball's biggest misconception. I've barely begun to scratch the surface, as if you delve deeper, there are even more misconceptions in Dragon Ball that I argue about to this day, but I can't cover them all in one video, as it would be hours long. If you'd like a part 2, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.